If you ask me which helicopter is the most uniquely beautiful and strictly purposeful in the US military's arsenal, the answer wouldn't be the Apache. It wouldn't be the Black Hawk. It would undoubtedly be the MH-6 LittleBird. Honestly, what design could be more elegantly simple than a flying egg? But do not let its small size fool you. In the world of special operations, there is an unwritten rule. When the Black Hawk falls, the LittleBird saves it. When the Black Hawk falters, the LittleBird takes over. We all know that the United States military just pulled off one of the most audacious combat search and rescue missions in history. Rescued a F-15E Strike Eagle weapon systems officer. During the mission, they didn't just destroy 2 MC-130J, they also rigged explosives to 4 MH-6 and AH-6 LittleBird helicopters, turning them into scorched scrap metal on the Iranian desert floor. Why were 4 ultralight helicopters sitting in the middle of Iran? Because the LittleBird is the exclusive, definitive ride of elite US Special Mission units. The LittleBird does not have the fuel range to fly from US bases in Kuwait or Iraq all the way to Isfahan province. Instead, they hitch a ride. The MH-6 and AH-6 are specifically designed to have their main rotor blades folded backward in a matter of minutes. Up to 4 of these helicopters can be rolled into the cargo bay of a single C-130. Seeing burned-out US helicopters in the Iranian desert brings up a lot of historical trauma for the US military. In fact, the very existence of the LittleBird and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment is a direct result of a failure in Iran 46 years ago. Following the Eagle Claw disaster, the Pentagon realized they had a massive gap in their capabilities. They needed a dedicated, highly trained aviation unit strictly for special operations. This led to the establishment of the 160th Aviation Battalion, which officially expanded into a regiment in 1990. Initially, the unit was equipped with UH-1 Hueys and CH-47 Chinooks. But commanders quickly realized that these medium and large transport helicopters were too big, too loud, and too slow for surgical special operations. The military desperately needed a light, highly agile helicopter that could be quickly deployed inside cargo planes. They found their answer in the Hughes OH-6A Cayuse. Developed in the 1960s, the OH-6A was an incredibly lightweight observation helicopter with an empty weight of just 557 kilograms and a range of 430 kilometers. Upon its debut, it shattered 23 different helicopter world records, including top flight speed, range, and climb time. It performed exceptionally well during the Vietnam War, often working in tandem with AH-1 Cobra gunships. It perfectly met the military's strict requirements for a special operations light helicopter. From the OH-6A, the modern AH-6 and MH-6 were born. The nickname LittleBird comes directly from its diminutive size, and the nomenclature is simple. The AH-6 is the attack helicopter version, and the MH-6 is the multi-mission version. Aesthetically, it is defined by its egg-shaped forward fuselage and a massive, continuous bubble canopy that provides the 2 side-by-side pilots with unparalleled, almost 360-degree visibility. With a maximum speed of 282 kilometers per hour, it is remarkably fast for its size. But what truly sets the MH-6 apart are the exterior side-mounted planks, or benches. This allows up to 6 fully armed special operators to sit completely on the outside of the aircraft, feet dangling in the wind. This design allows operators to step off onto a rooftop or fast rope into an alleyway in literally 2 to 3 seconds. Now you might be thinking, wait, a plastic bubble canopy and guys sitting on the outside of the helicopter? That sounds like a death trap. And you wouldn't be entirely wrong to question its survivability. The LittleBird has virtually no armor plating. For the troops sitting on the side benches, there is zero ballistic protection. They rely entirely on the speed of the aircraft, the darkness of night, and their own personal Kevlar body armor. However, for the pilots, the aircraft is surprisingly resilient in a crash. The LittleBird features an ingenious A-frame internal roll bar structure that absorbs kinetic impact. If the helicopter goes down hard, this frame prevents the cockpit from collapsing and crushing the crew, making it statistically one of the safest helicopters in a hard landing. But the 160th SOAR doesn't just use the LittleBird for taxi rides. The AH-6 variant is affectionately known as the Killer Egg. Despite being classified as a light attack helicopter, its combat power rivals much larger gunships. Heavily modified by Boeing, the AH-6 can be equipped with two M134 miniguns, firing up to 4,000 rounds per minute, M260 7-tube Hydra rocket pods, or Hellfire missiles. If a mission calls for extreme kinetic force, it can even mount a massive GAU-19 Gatling gun. Because the payload capacity is relatively low, a LittleBird cannot carry both troops and a heavy weapons loadout at the same time. You have to choose one or the other. But for the US military, this isn't a problem. If one isn't enough, you just send two. In actual operations, you will almost always see MH-6s and AH-6s flying in hunter-killer pairs, one dropping the troops and the other providing devastating pinpoint fire support. The mission of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment is drastically different from conventional Army aviation. They don't do mass assaults. Their entire doctrine revolves around overcoming the limitations of standard rotary wing flight. They fly at ultra-low altitudes at extremely high speeds in zero illumination to evade enemy air defense radars and deliver operators without warning. However, the LittleBird's very first combat deployment was a harsh reality check. In October 1983, during the US invasion of Grenada, the 160th and their LittleBird saw combat for the first time. 6 MH-6 and 2 AH-6 were flown in via C-130. They were carrying a Delta Force squadron and an Army Ranger detachment tasked with raiding Richmond Hill Prison. US intelligence indicated the prison was only defended by light infantry. But intelligence was wrong. As the Blackhawks and MH-6s approached the target, they were ambushed by two heavy anti-aircraft guns positioned on nearby ridges. A Blackhawk was immediately riddled with fire. The unarmored LittleBirds were forced to abort the primary assault, using their agility to cover the withdrawal. In its combat debut, the LittleBird was relegated to secondary support tasks, transporting wounded soldiers to Navy ships off the coast. But by 1987, during the Iran-Iraq War, the LittleBird found its true calling. During Operation Prime Chance, 2 MH-6s and 4 AH-6s were deployed to the Persian Gulf to escort Kuwaiti oil tankers and counter Iranian mine layers. Upgraded with forward-looking infrared and video systems, the MH-6 could silently hunt in the dark. They would sit on the decks of US Navy frigates, wait for target vectors from Navy SH-2 Sea Sprites, and then launch. In one famous engagement, the 160th used this exact hunter-killer tactic to capture 4 Iranian armed speedboats. The platform was maturing. In 1989, during the invasion of Panama, the LittleBird executed its first true specialized raids, infiltrating Torrijos Tocumen Airport and attacking the Panamanian Defense Forces headquarters. They took losses, 3 LittleBirds were shot down, but only suffered 1 fatality, proving that the A-frame crash structure actually worked. But it was 4 years later, in the dusty streets of the Horn of Africa, that the LittleBird would cement its legendary status. On October 3, 1993, US Special Operations launched a capture mission in the heart of Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia. The assault force consisted of 8 UH-60 Blackhawks and 4 LittleBirds, loaded with Delta Force operators and Army Rangers. The mission profile perfectly highlighted the stark contrast between the two helicopters. The Black Hawk is a phenomenal machine, but it is large, loud, and takes time to fast rope troops to the ground. Hovering over a hostile urban environment made them massive targets for rocket-propelled grenades. The LittleBird, on the other hand, was completely in its element. Its agility allowed it to physically fly between buildings and navigate the narrow, twisting streets of the Bakara market. To deploy the Delta operators, the MH-6 pilots didn't need a landing zone. They simply found a flat, corrugated tin rooftop, touched one skid down for 2 seconds, the operators stepped off the benches, and the helicopter dove back into the city streets. They infiltrated the target building completely unnoticed. But as we all know, the mission in Mogadishu devolved into a nightmare. 2 Blackhawks, Super 61 and Super 64, were shot down by RPG. 3 others were severely damaged. The mission instantly changed from a capture raid to a desperate rescue operation. The crash site of the first Black Hawk was located in an alleyway so congested and narrow that no other helicopter could physically fit inside to execute a rescue. Except for the LittleBird. Displaying absolute nerves of steel, an MH-6 piloted by Chief Warrant Officer Keith Jones and Chief Warrant Officer Carl Meyer swooped down into the alley, rotors literally inches from the walls. Under intense enemy fire, they successfully extracted 2 surviving soldiers from the downed Black Hawk. When the ground convoys became pinned down, the AH-6 killer eggs stepped up to bat. Throughout the night, the AH-6s provided continuous, devastating, danger-close fire support. They fired so many 7.62mm rounds and hydro rockets that they had to repeatedly fly back to the airfield, rearm without shutting down the engines, and fly straight back to the fight. Without the LittleBirds running gun runs just meters away from friendly troops, the US forces might not have survived the night. For the US military, Mogadishu was a strategic tragedy, but for the LittleBird, it was an undeniable, resounding tactical success. Following the battle, 8 LittleBird pilots were awarded the Silver Star for their unparalleled bravery and skill. The US military learned a vital lesson that day. Extreme maneuverability can absolutely compensate for a lack of armor. In low-intensity conflicts, the LittleBird doesn't need to worry about air superiority. It just needs to be fast, low, and lethal. Since Mogadishu, wherever US Special Forces go, the LittleBird follows. During the 2003 Iraq War, AH-6s worked alongside Delta Force to execute the famous rescue of captured American soldier Jessica Lynch. They hunted Taliban commanders in the mountains of Afghanistan. And most recently, in 2026, they pulled an aviator out of Iran. Today, the LittleBird occupies a very unique place in the US military arsenal. It is highly specialized, so its numbers are limited. Currently, there are only about 47 LittleBirds in active service, exclusively with the 160th SOAR. Its status is incredibly similar to the A-10 Warthog in the US Air Force. By modern, 5th-generation standards, the A-10 is hopelessly outdated. It is a slow-flying cannon that would struggle to survive in a major power conflict against modern air defenses. Yet, for close air support, its cost-effectiveness, loiter time, and lethality are unmatched by any advanced stealth fighter. The LittleBird is the exact same story. On paper, it lacks modern avionics, has zero armor, and a tiny payload. But in the specialized domain of urban combat and precise special operations insertions, it repeatedly saves Black Hawks and Special Forces operators. But just like the A-10, the LittleBird has been staring down its own retirement. Originally, the Pentagon planned to replace about half of the 160th SOAR's LittleBird fleet by the mid-2030s with special operations variants derived from the FARA program, the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft. But as we know, the US Army abruptly canceled the multi-billion-dollar FARA program, citing a shift in modern warfare towards unmanned drones. With its replacement completely wiped off the drawing board, the half-century-old LittleBird suddenly got a new lease on life. The military has pivoted back to the mission-enhanced LittleBird X upgrade project, which has now been officially designated as the MH-6R. The airframe is being newly reinforced with better crash-attenuating seats and larger crash-resistant fuel tanks. It is receiving an upgraded 6-blade main rotor system to allow for a slightly higher maximum takeoff weight. But the most critical upgrade is digital. The MH-6R is receiving network-centric software capabilities, advanced radio equipment, and communication relay systems, allowing this 1960s airframe to securely talk to 2026-era drones and stealth fighters. The LittleBird was fundamentally designed to operate in the shadows, to slip through the cracks of enemy front lines, and to support the most elite operators on the planet. The events of April 2026 in Iran proved that, with the right electronic warfare support and the cover of darkness, the LittleBird can still slip through the net and execute the mission. The US sacrificed 4 of these legendary helicopters in the Iranian desert, but the men they went in to save came home alive. For the 160th Night Stalkers, that is a trade they will make 100 times out of 100. Alright guys, that is the end of today's video. I want to hear from you. How long do you think the LittleBird can realistically continue to serve against near-peer adversaries? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below.